So we've had a pretty rough battle today. About 5 days ago, we lost power. What was it? From about 9 at night till about 3 in the morning. Happened to be the coldest day of the year. So all of our underground waters and livestock waters froze up in that time. We knew we had an uphill battle the next day. It was cold for like 3 days after that, but we tried. We did get some of them unthawed. Unfortunately, as we shifted everything around, insulation and stuff like that got moved around, so they froze back up. So we were up there yesterday and the day before, and one of the one of the hoses got melted. So when it did finally come, the water finally came. It was actually leaking out of the side of the hose, and it was too far in the ground that I couldn't fix it. So that's going to be a summer project. However, we're nearing the end of winter and the end of the horrendous temperatures, cold temperatures, so we should be able to, we don't have a lot of animals, so we should be able to keep up just paling them up water every day. So today we were inside and we were kind of wrapping up our 2021 seeding plan. And I thought I would make a video on that just to shed just a tiny bit of light onto what it might cost to seed a 2,400 acre farm up here in northern Alberta. So we grow canola, wheat, peas, barley, and oats, and we are generally pretty close when we divide the acres up amongst those 5 crops. This year and this is a tentative plan, it will change by April, but in order to get some pre-pricing and some deals, you have to commit some acres to some things just to save a little bit of money. So this year, 2021, we're planning about 650 acres of canola, 550 acres of wheat, 520 or so acres of barley, 380 acres of peas, and 210 acres of oats. And yeah, I do have a paper right here, that's why I keep looking that way. So seed costs alone on the canola is going to be just under 44,000. The wheat, we're going to use our own seed, but so I just use the daily price of wheat. Because instead of selling it, we'll keep it and seed it. So that will cost us about $8,300 for wheat, $6,600 for barley, $12,500 for peas, and about $3,000 for oats. Seed cost on the 2,400 acres will be about $74,000. You get into chemical and inoculants and things like that. Inoculant that we put on our peas is $1,000. The ground that we didn't get worked or pre-sprayed, or even like our pea ground anyways, even if it was worked in the fall, we'll get a pre-pass of glyphosate, because spraying options, we grow peas and canola together, so spraying options in crop are very, very limited. So we'll do a pre-spray. So we buy about 1,300 acres worth of glyphosate, and that costs us about $5,500. Then you move into fertilizers. When we price out our fertilizer, we price it out at basically minimum requirements, and then we basically buy that much. You can always buy more as the as the season goes. So things like, if it looks like you're gonna have a really, really good spring and a really good start, you feel a little better, and you're willing to do a little bit more in investing in fertilizer and stuff like that. So our basically rock bottom fertilizer prices for anhydrous ammonia is going to be $65,000. Phos is going to be $56,000. Potash is going to be $1,400. Sulfur is going to be $4,500, which is like $126,000 in fertilizer. Then you move into chemicals. For our cereals, we don't actually know what we're going to spray on them, and we kind of don't know until the weeds come up, because if you had desiccated ground in the fall of last year, you may have got some pretty good control on some things like Canada thistles and stuff like that, weeds that are really, really aggressively growing in the fall. They're quite easy to kill in the fall, so if you're going to do that, you will get a lot of that stuff, and that will actually change the type of chemical you're going to need to spray. So for our cereal acres, we basically just assume $30 an acre should cover that, regardless of what we need to spray. So on 1,150 acres of cereals, we're going to need about $34,000 worth of chemical. Our canola, we know we're going to grow a Liberty canola, so you need a Liberty chemical. That's going to cost us $6,800. And the stuff we're going to spray on our pea and canola mix is going to cost us about $5,400. So the total on the chemical is going to be about $46,363. That brings us, I think, to a total of $262,000 and change. There was one thing I'm not sure if I added in there. Last year, or last fall, we did 450 acres of a wild oat chemical. Wild oats, the last 3 or 4 years on our farm have kind of gotten out of hand. They've been a real issue. We've had some really wet, like late springs, early summers, right in spraying season, where you couldn't get the right time of application. The one year, the chemical I sprayed didn't really seem to work at all. So at the end of the fall last year, we had a little bit of time, so we sprayed 3/4 sections with that, and then we tilled it in. So that chemical alone cost about $9,000, and we had we put nitrogen down when we worked the chemical in, so that cost is going to be in there too. So that's going to be $74,000 for seed. Going to be $1,000 for inoculant, $5,300 for the glyphosate to do a pre-burn before we seed, $126,000 for fertilizer, and $46,000 for chemical. Brings you to a total of about $262,000 to put the 2,400 acres in. Some things I didn't factor in, and these I don't because they're so, they're so up in the air, and they're so basically farm specific. One is fuel, and that fuel and lubricants. Depending on what your maintenance schedule is, depending on what horsepower you have, if you're over horsepowered or under horsepowered for what you're pulling, that's going to make a difference to what fuel you're burning. The newer tractors, they do burn a little less fuel, so that's whatever. On our farm, I think in seeding and spraying season, we're using about 4,000 liters a week. So that's like a 3-week, 4-week window. So you're going to need between 10 and 15,000 liters of fuel. So you can, I guess if you assume it's $1 a liter, you're going to need, so there's another $15,000. But you can't assume that. I mean, some years fuel is $1.10, and some years it's 70 or whatever. So we just don't really factor it in there. It's a cost that we know we have. Another one is maintenance costs on the machines. We do a lot of our own maintenance, so it's just parts. And parts are very expensive, but we if you're willing to do the work yourself and you don't need to get a mechanic out here to fix the stuff, that's another thing that's going to be super farm specific. If you're willing to do an extra 1,000 acres on your openers on your drill before you change them out, right? There's all sorts of things, but it is a cost, and it is a fairly big cost. Technology is one I put in there this year because I was starting to realize, like, our farm's reliance on technology. We have GPS in basically everything. Those units, I think, they're as low as maybe $7,500, as high as about 14,000, maybe even higher, depending on how precision you get with them. They're definitely worth it. They eliminate things like operator fatigue throughout the day. You don't worry about overlapping or missing. You're not focused on driving. You can spend a lot more time looking behind you, making sure your equipment is working the way that it should. And coming with, if you're not overlapping, you're not using extra seed, extra fertilizer, extra chemical, because it doesn't take a lot of time to add up, an extra 2, 3, 4, 5 acres on a field if you're overlapping and stuff like that. And our average cost per acre this year so far to seed is going to be $112. So if you're going to seed, if you're going to spend an extra $500 or $600 every quarter in overlaps and misses, and you got 10 quarters, well, that's $6,000, right? If you got 20 quarters, it's $12,000. So it buys a GPS every year. So that one's in there, and that's, like I say, I didn't add it into my total because it's totally farm specific. If you think it's worth it, it is, and if you don't, then it's not. Then the last one is, basically the cost of the land, I guess, right? So you got land taxes, and maybe you got land payments, and then you got land rent. Yet again, all farm specific. Our farm, we rent, I think, now we rent about 210 acres. The rest we own, or you know. So my quarters, they have their payments, but that's really, I don't really factor that in as an input cost. I guess that's more of an investment. So that's not in there either. Land rent in our area is basically, if you can find it for $25 an acre, you should be pretty happy about it. More likely you're going to be around 30 or 40. I've heard, upwards of 50, 60. I'm not sure why people would pay that. That's more of a competition thing, as opposed to actually the ground being worth it, because we are in a marginal soil area. We do have pockets around the piece that are higher production areas and better soil, but mostly it's a little bit tougher than that. So, as I said at the start, this is basically a bare bones plan. You have to come up with some numbers for your seed salesman, your fertilizer salesman, and your chemical salesman, so they can start knowing what they need to order for you for the growing season. You do have to, you got to commit some funds sometimes to ensure that you get it at a cheaper price, maybe, than buying it in June when you need it. You might have to take delivery of some of this stuff, which is fine, and that's why we do this. Things that will be a factor is what the spring starts to look like. If we can't get into the ground until the middle of May, like our canola acres will take some out. Our wheat acres will take some out, and we'll seed more barley and peas. If we get in the ground in April and we can till all the ground and get it to seeding condition, and it looks like it's going to be a nice growing season, then we maybe we'll up our wheat acres and maybe even put some more fertilizer and stuff down. So there's a million factors that come into play once you get closer to seeding. This is just super like a super temporary, bare bones plan that you can use to figure out a general cheapest scenario cost going into the 2021 season. So hopefully you followed along with that if you were watching, and maybe found it interesting, maybe not. As always, to those of you who watch, thank you very much. That's going to be it for me tonight. I'm going to go find myself a glass of water and call her an evening. So everybody out there, hopefully you enjoyed your long weekend, and we will see you all on the next one.